So first we're gonna rinse everything with deionized water. And then to set up, there's some chlorophyll, old chlorophyll. The filter pads are with the filter unit. So this is our chlorophyll filtration. Okay, so when starting to filter any sample, you want to make sure that you agitate the sample really well before pouring it. And then whatever you're going to use to measure it needs to get rinsed 3 times with the water you're using. So this is our chlorophyll filtration. You gotta watch out because there's holes in the side. So if you want, higher than that, you gotta make sure you cover it with your finger. Anything being filtered in this top part is getting collected in this flask over here. So you need to make sure that you watch how much volume is going in there and you empty it in between all the samples so that you don't suck water into the other traps and into the pump. For the chlorophyll sample, we fix it with magnesium carbonate, which is with each of the units also. So you only need 1 ml, which is not very much. You want to make sure you just give it a little bit. With the chlorophyll, you want to make sure that you turn the vacuum off as soon as it's done filtering so that it's not continuing to suck on the filter pad, because then it can lyse the cells for the chlorophyll. This is one of our foil squares. This one says TSS, but each of the parameters have a different foil square. The chlorophylls are all green, the PCPMs are all red, and the TSSs are all black. So you would write your volume, which is the total volume filtered through the filter pad, on here, and then each one goes in the foil. Watching feet dry. So you want to make sure that you fold the filter pad so that the sample is on the inside, so that it doesn't get all over the inside of the foil. So you just fold it in half, and then it just goes in here, folded. And then it's ready to go in the bag to go to the PCPN filtering. So it's particulate carbon, particulate nitrogen. We generate 2 pads, so these 2 small pads. So sometimes these are a little bit pesky to get folded, so some people like to fold them from front to back, or back, front to back, or back to front. One thing I will say is if you can see when you put them on, they have a little bit of graining to them. So if you put them so that you fold along the grain, it makes it much easier. And these are already all rinsed with DI before putting the filters on. One thing you need to be careful of is to not really crank down on them, because if you tighten these really tight, it'll cut the filter pad, and then when you go to take it off, you'll get a little ring, and you'll have to redo the filter. So just like in the chlorophyll filtration, you want to filter where you have pretty good color on the pad. Not so much color that it slows down, a ton, but you want to make sure there's enough color there for something to analyze. A lot of times when we are doing the coastal base, we'll filter like 250 for the larger pads and 100 for the smaller pads. Obviously, the more turbid the water is, the less you're going to be able to filter. You want to make sure that you put the exact same amount of volume in each filter. So I did 100 mils, so 100 in here and 100 in here. So the volume you would write on your foil is 100. So it's the volume that's filtered through one pad. So sometimes when you go to take this off, I like to sometimes turn it on the release and then grab a hold of the edge of it and turn the vacuum back on to help make it easier to fold. Try to make sure you're just grabbing the edge so that you're not running the forceps over the sample. And then when you put them in, make sure the 2 pads aren't touching so that they don't freeze together. Okay, so this is our TSS PP filtration, which also includes filling up the different bottles and vials for the dissolve parameters. So these filters come from the lab. Sometimes they'll be in like this, or they might be in a container like this, but they'll be labeled TSS PP. They are actually dried and weighed filter pads, so they all have numbers on them. So you want to make sure. This has already been rinsed, but you want to make sure when you put it on that the number goes down so that when you fold it, the number's on the outside of the pad. So This filtration we're going to collect into this flask so that we can use the water to fill all of this stuff. We already rinsed our graduated cylinder 3 times from the chlorophyll filtration. So what we need to do for this sample, we need to make sure we rinse the flask first so that whatever we're collecting has already been rinsed with that. We need to make sure it's been 50 mils to rinse that flask. So these filter bells have gradations on them. So it doesn't have to be exactly 50, but it needs to be at least 50 mils. So just make sure you rinse this really well and that gets distorted. Some of the samples will only have one test tube and 3 vials. The vials are for like nitrate, ammonia, and orthophosphate. If there's ever a 4th vial, so a few of the samples have that, that's actually for silicate, so that one needs to go in the refrigerator, and the other 3 get frozen. Every sample should have a test tube for total dissolved nitrogen and phosphorus. And then the samples that have a silicate also sometimes have a bottle like this. It's for dissolved organic carbon. So this one's kind of a pain because you have to have that much more filtrate to make sure you can fill everything up. When we go to fill everything up, it's just like when we're pouring it in the graduated cylinder. Everything has to get rinsed 3 times with the water that you're putting in the tube. So I'm sure this is not going to be enough water to fill all of this stuff up, so I'm going to need to generate another pad just to get more filtrate. So first I will show you if we want to, since this is for suspended solids, it needs to get rinsed. And since these are crystal base samples, it needs to get rinsed really well because the salt content of the samples is very high. So I'm going to put this over on this flask, and this is going to be my rinse flask where I'm just all I'm using it for is to rinse this filter pad. So you want to make sure you give it at least a 10 ml rinse, and you want to do that 4 or 5 times because these are very salty samples. So you need to rinse it and then let it suck dry and then do it again. And then after the 5th one, you can let it suck dry and then fold it up and put it in the foil. While this one's rinsing, I'm gonna start generating more filtrate. So the filters that are used are the exact same ones that we use for chlorophyll. These ones just aren't weighed, but the pore size is the same and everything. So we're not gonna save this filter for any other analyses. since we're not going to save it, we can just dump some water in, because all we're trying to do is get more water down here. So this one's ready to come off. And again, just fold it in half. Make sure the number is visible on the back. And just goes in that foil. Every 10 samples, there may be some designation on the foil where you have to generate 2 pads. And that's for a lab replicate. So there'll be a few foils that'll say 2 chlorophyll pads and 2 TSS pads. So on those samples, you need to generate 2 filter pads with the exact same volume. Okay, so hopefully this will be enough to fill up all of our stuff. So again, everything has to get rinsed 3 times. And this processing is really what the gloves are for, because some of the things we measure are really low levels, so that's why we wear gloves when we do it. So these guys, they need to be filled up and dumped out 3 times as well. And then before you put the cap on, there's like a ridge here. So just shake the water out to that ridge. And try to not, you know, stick your fingers in the vials and like all in the caps and stuff. So always try to handle everything by the edges to reduce contamination. So again, if there's 4 vials, 1 will go in the refrigerator and 3 will go in the freezer. If there's only 3, then all 3 go in the freezer. So again, this is the same thing. We need to make sure both this 10 mil graduated cylinder and the test tube get rinsed 3 times. When you're filling this, you gotta make sure you shake all the extra water out, because they actually do the digestion in the tube, so they have to know that it's exactly 10 mils. A lot of these graduated cylinders have holes in them, so make sure you cover your hole with your finger so it doesn't dribble out the front. And then the same thing, just shake out the cap to get any extra rinse water out. And that goes in the freezer as well. And this is the same, still needs to get rinsed 3 times. And this needs to get filled up to the shoulder. Since it's going in the freezer, it needs to have some extra room to expand. So I guess that's it.